Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Books. As always, I am Helen and I am coming to you from Dundee in Scotland, and this is where I get to chat about books. We will do my usual wrap up of the previous month. So in this case, we're doing a February wrap up, and then we will look ahead to the books that I'm thinking about getting to in March. So yeah, welcome back everyone. Thank you to everyone that comes and checks out these videos. I know they're still relatively new for my channel and I'm still hoping to kind of grow the audience as such. So any likes and shares and anything like that are greatly appreciated. I have been to the hairdresser this morning and had my hair done again today, had my colour put back in, which is very nice, and she's curled it, but I keep thinking I've got flicky bits going in funny directions, but it's only because it's got the curl in it and I'm just not used to it. But anyway, so if I'm fiddling with my hair, it's because I keep seeing flicky bits, but they are meant to be there at the moment. It just doesn't feel like my hair. Anyway, so shall we get straight into it? Because I don't have much of a big introduction for these videos. So yeah, we are doing a February wrap up to start with. So we will start with the statistics. I finished a total of 6 books in February. I also had 2 DNFs, and I'm going to try and remember to talk about the DNFs because I keep forgetting to. And that worked out as a total of 2,917 pages, although that doesn't include the amount I read of the DNF, the books that I DNF'd. It's just the books I finished, which gave me an average of 486 pages per book, which seems quite a lot more than previous months. In fact, I was going to look back in my stats from the last one, because I finished 6 books in January. Yeah, I finished 6 books in January, but I only had an average pages per book of 356. And that's because I think there were a couple of longer books in there for February. And overall, I had an average star rating of 4.5. So it was a really, really good reading month. I read a lot of books that I really enjoyed in February. I listened to 2 audiobooks and DNF'd 1 audiobook. And I read 4 physical books and DNF'd 1 physical book. So yeah, that's the stats. What was I going to say? Star rating system. I talked at the beginning of this year about how I was going to introduce different systems for different types of books, and it seems like I haven't done that yet. And I think that's only because in January, all of the books that I read in January fitted under like a standard star rating. I didn't read any thrillers, I didn't really read any romance books, or if I did read a romance book, which I think I did, like Wolf Song, it felt like it didn't fit within the same as a normal romance category, so I felt like it fitted within the normal star rating, if that makes sense. But I think I have 1 book this month which we're going to rate slightly differently, so we will explain that when we get to it. But let's just get to it. So, in the order that I read them during the month, I read The Briar Club by Kate Quinn. I listened to this one on audiobook and it's a brilliant, brilliant audiobook. I have read a few other Kate Quinn books. I read, I've forgotten, Diamond Eye last year, and I've read, I can't remember what the other one was called now. I've read, no, it's gone. It's gone. I've read a couple of the other ones by her. I think I've read The Rose Code, and there's something to do with the Alice something or other, but I can't remember the names of it. So I've read a fair few Kate Quinn books. This one was quite different because a lot of the ones I've read before were based around the Second World War and that kind of historical kind of fiction narrative. This was definitely historical fiction, but in The Briar Club we are set in 1950s America, in Washington DC to be specific, and it's all based around a boarding house for women. We follow various women. I think there's like 9. I can't remember quite how many women there are. But we follow various women in this boarding house, and you start the book knowing that there's been a murder, knowing that somebody has died, and that's where we kind of start the book. And then we pick up the story, with a murder or 2 that's been introduced, as I've just said, and then we head back in time, and each chapter follows, each kind of I don't know because I didn't read it as a physical book. It might be broken down. I feel like the chapters are too long to not be broken down within the sections. But anyway, we have sections then, and each section is based on a different woman in the boarding house. So we have like Fliss, who is a young mother. She's British, and her husband is a doctor in Korea. And he's been sent off, I think he's a doctor in the military, and he's been sent off to Korea during whatever war is going on there and everything like that. So she is there on her own with her very young daughter, struggling with motherhood and things like that. And then we also follow Nora, who falls in love with a gangster, and kind of the effect that she's the daughter of a policeman, and she falls in love with this gangster. And yeah, it's all of these different stories and different things that are kind of going on with all these women and how their lives all interweave. And then we have Grace. And Grace is kind of, she's not quite our main character, but Grace is the person who brings these women together. And when she moves into the boarding house, she sets up what she calls the Briar Club, which is basically an evening supper club where they all get together and they have dinner and they get to know each other, basically. So she's brought all these women together and is very much the catalyst in a lot of events in their lives. It's set alongside the whole McCarthy kind of Red Scare, communism kind of thing that went on during the 1950s in America. Not a part of history I know a lot about. It's obviously American history, which is not something we particularly studied at school here. I did a lot to do with the American West and stuff like that, but nothing in kind of more modern age kind of American history, which is understandable. I don't live in America, so it's not something that is necessarily regularly taught here. But it was really interesting to kind of delve into that history and things like that. It covers a lot of topics and a lot of different themes. In fact, to some extent, I actually felt like it covered a bit too many. So you get a lot of topics around racism, sexuality, motherhood, there's some domestic abuse in there. But because she tried to pack so much into these themes and so much into these books, I feel like all of those kind of topics are only ever kind of fleetingly tackled. And it's a lot. It's a lot to pack into one book, definitely. I very much enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars, but it's not my favourite of Kate Quinn's books. I'm not sure if that's the time period or if I feel a little bit like she just tried to do too much with all of these different women and all of their different stories, and then giving them all challenges and things that we're having to deal with, and kind of that kind of thing, if that makes sense. Like it felt a little bit like you didn't get enough time with one story, if that makes sense. But I very much enjoyed it. One of the things I very much enjoyed was that the boarding house itself is given a personality. You get chapters from the boarding house's perspective, which is really interesting and quite fun. But that's done in a really nice way. And I very much enjoyed the kind of traveling through the times with the women and learning more about them and the way their lives intertwined, and then finally getting to the reveal of what has happened and what's introduced at the beginning of the book. So yeah, that was the Briar Club. I enjoyed it, but yeah, not my favourite Kate Quinn to date, but still very enjoyable. Then I have that one. I think I have the rest of them as physical books, oh, apart from one, because I did listen to another audiobook. Then I finished Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb. This is the 3rd and final book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which is part of the Realm of the Elderlings kind of big kind of series. Absolutely loved this. So I obviously can't tell you too much about the plot line in this, but in terms of the Realm of the Elderlings, we've got sea serpents and pirates and live ships, which are basic sentient ships that come to life. We've got the mysterious Rainwilders, we've got the Bingtown Traders, we've got dragons, we've got all kinds of stuff going on in these. It's very much a multi-perspective, so not multi-perspective in the way that the prose is like, you know how you get like characters that are different chapters? It's not like that. What I mean is there are a lot of characters and a lot of interwoven stories and narratives around those characters. But it's done really well, and I love the way that it all comes together, because we follow so many different characters in this trilogy, whereas I feel like with the first trilogy, what's the first trilogy called? I can't remember what the first trilogy is called, but the Assassin's Apprentice trilogy, you very much follow Fitz, and although there are other characters in the background, he is your main port of kind of narrative, if that makes sense. Whereas with these, you've got such a wide range of characters, but Robin Hobb is so good at characterizations that I never felt like I was confused by who anybody was. I couldn't remember who people were. It's very, very well done, the way she flicks. Sorry, I keep doing this. It's going to come across on the camera and I'm going to be really annoying. I will try and stop. It very much flits between those characters in a really, really really good way. I'm looking at my notes now. Oh, yeah, that was the other thing I said. Yeah, one of the things that I love about Robin Hood's characterization is how she can introduce a character that is the most annoying character that you loathe and you hate. But by the end of the trilogy, like, you're rooting for them and they become one of your favourite characters, and their growth and everything that they've gone through during this journey is incredible. And there is a particular character in this that I really, really felt that with. And if you've read the trilogy, it'd be interesting to see if you can guess who that character is. But yeah, I am very excited to start the next trilogy. I have ordered the next book. I found it on Vinted, so I've got a second-hand copy coming to me. Should be arriving hopefully in the next couple of days, and yeah, I am excited to put that up because the next trilogy takes us back to Fitz, because it is the Tawny Man trilogy, which the first book is Fool's Errand, so we're going back to Fitz and back to the Fool, and I couldn't be more excited about that because I really, yeah, loving this series of books. So glad I started picking it up. Right, 5 stars, by the way. I didn't put my star rating. I didn't say my star rating for that one, did I? Absolutely, 5 stars. It finished off the trilogy really, really, really well. And having complained in the past how I find them quite big books and I find them quite slow to get through, I sped through that one because I just couldn't put it down. I just wanted to know what was happening. Then I'm trying to think. We'll do the DNFs at the end before we move on to March's books. But I then finished The Appeal by Janice Hallett. This was one that I picked up because it was picked for my Patreon book club. And I really genuinely wasn't sure how I was going to get along with this because it isn't told in prose. It's very much told in emails and things like that. But do you know what? It worked. It so worked. And I couldn't put this down. I read this in the space of like 2 days because I was just hooked and I just needed to know what was going to happen. We follow the story of the Fairway Players, who are an amateur dramatic society in a small town. And you know that something has happened. You know from the blurb that there's been a murder. But from the beginning of the book, you don't know that. But there are 2... trainee lawyers, Femi and Charlotte, and they have been tasked by their boss. They have been tasked with looking through all this correspondence to kind of see what they read from it, see what they get from it, and whether their kind of conclusions are the same as their boss or not. So we know that something has happened, but they're not told what has happened. And then all this correspondence they're looking through is emails and text messages and letters and things like that that are from or related to all of this cast of characters around the Fairway Players. What is really interesting is that quite often they're very one-sided. So for example, there's a character called Isabel who is quite a character. And you see a lot of her emails going to people, and her emails in particular, there is a character called Sam who Isabel latches onto as her new best friend, basically. And you see all of her emails to Sam, but what you don't see is any of the emails back. And the way that's done is really interesting because you're very much getting like a one-sided conversation with some of these characters, and that's really interesting. What is fascinating is how you manage to learn so much about the characters and get a real feel for these characters, considering you're only reading their emails and things like that. So it's very much set around the background of the play. They're putting on a new play. They've just had their characters cast. There are two newbies who have joined, Sam and her husband, and they're kind of doing this. And then one of the so the granddaughter of the organisers of the Fairway Players, basically, is diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer, and they need to raise a lot of money for her to be able to get a experimental drug that is supposed to cure this cancer or help treat her, basically. And that becomes quite a big part, and they're then raising funds for that. But there's some irregularities, and yeah, it gets very kind of interesting to kind of see all the discussions around it. And yeah, it's really, really hard to describe, but it is very, very clever, I will say that. And one of the things I really liked is that every so often you get Femi and Charlotte popping in with their messages to each other, sort of summing up what they've kind of concluded so far. So there were a couple of occasions where you'd get to that and they'd suddenly mention something and I'd be like, oh, I didn't pick up on that. But actually, now that you're saying it, yes, I get it. And that was really nice. So yeah, really, really good. Really enjoyed it. Now, this is one I'm going to give a different type of rating. So I was torn between whether I stick with a normal star rating or whether we go for a kind of crime and thriller specific rating. But I think we'll go for a crime and thriller specific rating because within a crime and thriller specific rating, I would probably, and we're going to go for a dagger because why not? So within a crime and specific rate and thriller rating, this would be absolutely 4.5 stars. Really, 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 really good. But it probably wouldn't quite stand up to, say, Ship of Destiny, if that makes sense. So yeah, 4.5 daggers. Okay, what's next? So the next one is actually a kids book. So we finished Skandar and the Chaos Trials. This is the third book in the Skandar series. Is it called the Skandar series? I assume it's called the Skandar series. I don't know if it has its own name. But this is the third book in the Skandar series. It's by A.F. Steadman. I love this series. We listened to the first book on audiobook as a family last August when we were doing a lot of travelling and we were at a big convention where I was vending, so we had a lot of evenings sat in the hotel rooms and stuff like that. So we picked this up as an audiobook and listened to the first book and we all loved it, and we've barely stopped reading them since. So you follow Skandar Smith, who at the beginning of the first book, basically, how to describe this? I obviously can't tell you much about this book specifically, but the series in general follows Skandar Smith, who is a trainee unicorn rider, basically. So we have a world where there is an island which has wild unicorns on it, and these unicorns... according to the people that live on the island, the unicorns need riders in order to thrive, basically. So at the age of 13, children are tested to see if they are the right, destined, that would be the word, to see if they're destined to be a unicorn rider. They then go to the island and they go to the hatchery and they are bonded with their unicorn, and they then go to the Eyrie, which is basically the school where they learn to become unicorn riders, and each book follows a different year at the Eyrie. And it's so complex, this series. It is incredible. So he has a quartet of friends because they ride in quartets based on their element. They're broken up into elements, earth, fire, air, and earth, fire, air and water. There's also a fifth element, spirit, which is not an element that is generally accepted. It's kind of outlawed at the beginning of the books. And then, so they have their little quartet of friends. And by this book, we've also got Skandar's sister on the island. But it is so good. It's really hard to describe when it's the third book in a series. But what I absolutely love about this series and why I rave about it is because the diversity is fantastic. And it's also really well described. And like you know that these characters are not just white. They are a diverse group of characters, and it's really well described, but done in a way that is just there. It's just part of it. It also, everything is grey. So a lot of children's books, you get like, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, we're the good guys kind of thing. But with this, you've got, so you have the Eyrie, which is the school where Skandar is, but there's a lot of kind of, certain things aren't accepted. You have to win. It's all about winning. It's all about being the best. It's all about becoming the Commodore, becoming the person in charge. That is the aim of the Eyrie. And if you're not good enough, you're rejected and you become a nomad. But we're kind of brought into the idea that the Eyrie is the good side of it. We then have the Weaver, who is the bad person in the world, but some of what she's trying to do, in that she's trying to do a lot with the wild unicorns and things like that. You start, as you go through the books, you start to think, is this kind of right? So basically the unicorns, I'm going to put the book down before I'm just waving it everywhere. But one of the things that's really interesting in this series is that the unicorns, if the unicorns grow up unbonded, so once they hatch, if they aren't bonded with a rider, then they basically will die forever. So they basically become undead unicorns and they will live forever in that undead form. But if they are bonded with a human, then they are fine and they live a mortal life. But they live a mortal life. They don't live forever. And there's a lot of kind of, I really feel like I'm not explaining this well, that there are so many kind of grey areas in this where you kind of start to think to yourself, hang on a second, the Eyrie is supposed to be the good place, but there's a lot of things going on there that are not right. And it's done in a really, really, really good way. And I can't wait to see where the story goes. There are 5 books in total in this trilogy, I think. That's the stupidest thing I've ever said. There are 5 books in total in this series. As I said, this is book 3. We have got book 4 on the shelves at home. And book 5, I think, comes out in August. And I think book 5 is the final book in the series. So yeah, I can't wait to see where this goes. My eldest, Arthur, was desperate to read book 4, but Jasper decided he wanted a break because he wanted to read one of the books that he got for his birthday. But yeah, I am reading it to my children who are 8 and 11, and they're both really enjoying it. I would say it's probably geared towards the older end of that age range. Like, I think Jasper loves it and he's really, really enjoying it. But I think maybe an 8-year-old who is either an older child or doesn't have an older sibling or is slightly more immature may struggle with it. There are some quite scary bits in it and things like that. But yeah, my 8-year-old is fine with it. My 11-year-old absolutely loves it. And I would suspect that it would definitely go up until for older children as well if they were going to read it for themselves. Hell, I would read it to myself if I wasn't reading it to my children now that I've got into it, because it's brilliant. 5 stars I gave this one, absolutely. And I have debated whether I should have given it like a children's rating. Like, I don't know, I haven't thought about what my children's rating would be, but like toys, how many toys would I give it? But do you know what? No, I think it stands up there with any other series of books, and it's sticking with a normal 5-star rating. Right. I can just wax lyrical about this series. I love it so much. Okay, what else did I finish? Haha! I finished The House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Finally, I have read it. Now, interesting one. So I really enjoyed this, absolutely. I gave it 4.5 stars. I loved it. It was really, really good. But it took me a bit of time to get into. And I wasn't expecting that. I was kind of expecting it to love it from the outset. But I did find that for me, the start was quite slow. And I was like, people have raved about this. Everyone goes on and on about this. But why? Because I haven't kind of worked that out yet. But once I got there, I got there. So we follow Linus Baker, who works for the department in charge of magical youths, because in this world, all magical children live basically in orphanages. It's not the right word for them, but that is a whole thing. But they live in orphanages, controlled by the department in charge of magical youth. To make them safe, because all magical beings have to be registered and controlled, basically. So he is a caseworker. He works for this department. It's a very boring job, very dull life. He lives on his own in the city. There's not a lot of excitement. There's not much that goes on in his life. He lives alone with his cat, and yeah, not a lot happens. And then one day, he is called to meet with very upper management, and they want to send him on a task. So they send him on a secret task to Marcius Orphanage, because they want him to go and do a report as his job as a caseworker. He's often sent to orphanages, but this is one that is very much like, it's a restricted information, restricted access kind of secret files kind of thing. I don't know if any of that made sense. So he travels off, he's sent off to this island. He finally gets to see the sea for the first time, something he's always wanted to do. But when he gets to this island, it very much reveals that he hasn't been given all the information he should have done. All the files he was given didn't really give him the information he needed, because there is something very different about this orphanage and these children. What he's used to is like little girls who can maybe move bricks with their minds and, you know, that kind of thing. But when he meets the children at this orphanage, they are very different to what he was expecting. And it is... yeah, it's very much, he comes to this orphanage, he's there for a month, he gets to know the children. It's very much a lot about, you know, understanding people without kind of predetermined prejudices and stuff like that. There is one child in particular, Lucy, who is Lucifer, who is the Antichrist. But he's not a bad kid, you know, and it's very much about kind of that kind of thing. Just because he happens to be the Antichrist doesn't mean he can't grow up and be a perfectly sensible person. He's not necessarily going to destroy the world just because that is the label that he has been given. It's very much found family and everything like that. I'm trying to see what I've written down about it. Yeah, it's very much a case of found family, and yeah. It is, yeah. The ending and like the second half of the book, I'd say the first half of the book, I was very much kind of like, okay, yeah, this is all right. Second half of the book, like once he gets settled in at the orphanage and once he gets to know them and once things kind of start to move, I guess, I was sucked in and it was lovely and it was incredible. And I'm very glad I've got the second book on my shelves because I'd really like to get back with these characters. So yeah, House on the Cerulean Sea. I have finally read it after, goodness knows how long of kind of adding it to TBRs and just not getting round to it. So the final book that I finished was an audiobook, and that was A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. I gave this 4 stars. I very much enjoyed it. We are following Lady Trent. This is very much the memoirs of Lady Trent. It feels set in like the late 1800s kind of thing, but it's not set in our world. So we're not kind of given a date as such, but it feels that kind of Victorian era kind of thing, basically. But yeah, we follow Lady Trent, who is a natural historian, and she is obsessed with dragons. And this is very much the memoir of her younger days. So we discover her slightly as a child and then into her kind of days as a young woman when she first gets married and convinces her husband that she wants to go on his expedition with him to a far off land where they're going to be researching and investigating dragons. And we follow kind of what happens and the escapades and the adventures that they go on and the trouble she gets herself into and everything like that. It is a really charming lip read. It's really easy to listen to. It is a very kind of calming book, I think. Definitely kind of found it that peaceful, kind of relaxed kind of feel as I listened to it. It is the first in a series, and I definitely think I'll be going on to listen to more books in the series because, yeah, it was just a pleasure, really. Right, before I forget, DNFs. I had 2 DNFs. So first of all, I DNF'd Luckenbooth by Jenny Fagan. And this, it was a shame. Again, this was one of the books that was for my book club, and I actually picked it up before I picked up The Appeal, thinking that this would be the book that I would read for the book club. But I got 86 pages into this, and I just wasn't following it. I didn't get on very well with the style of prose in this book. It's very short, choppy sentences, and I also didn't get on very well with the way that Jenny Fagan did speech in this as well. It wasn't the kind of traditional speech bubbles, kind of what you'd expect, and I struggled sometimes to know who was talking in that respect. Also, it just didn't really go anywhere. Like, there was lots of chapters about all these different people. So I should give you a synopsis, really, shouldn't I? Basically, the people, so we have 10 Luckenbooth Close, which is a tenement block in Edinburgh. We're in the early 1900s, 1910 in Edinburgh. And the people who own this tenement block want a child, but they can't have a child in the traditional way. So they do a deal with the devil, and the devil sends his daughter to have a baby for them. And then the idea of the book, I believe, is that we then follow the tenement block through the ages as this kind of this event, this baby being born at the tenements, and maybe what happens, I don't know, because I may have not got far enough to kind of understand that, curses the tenement block and affects the lives of all the people that live there throughout the years. So we follow various different characters, and each chapter is a different character. But yeah, I got 86 pages in, which is sort of that far into the book. And I was it just wasn't doing it for me. I wasn't interested. I was struggling with the prose, and it just wasn't worth it for me. So yeah, unfortunately, that one was DNF'd. The other book that I DNF'd, and this one may be an issue with audiobook versus physical book, because I do struggle with audiobooks sometimes. And I have learned that often fantasy doesn't work for me in an audiobook kind of format, but I thought I would give it a go. But the book I DNF'd is Godkiller by Hannah Kaner, and I genuinely don't know if this was an audiobook issue for me or if it was just that the story didn't work for me. But I can't even really give you a synopsis of this one because I'm still not 100% sure what was kind of going on. But basically, we follow a few different characters. So this is set in a world where gods have been outlawed, basically. So people are not supposed to worship gods. But it's a world where gods can be anything from like a god of fire or like very different types of gods, if that makes sense. But they are very much physical beings. And we follow a god killer. I've forgotten the names of all the characters because that was one of the issues I was having with the book, was keeping up with all the characters. We follow a god killer. We follow one of the king's best friends, who used to be part of the king's army but has now left to become a baker. But he is sent on a mission from the king because the king has heard that there are people trying to kill him, and he wants his friend to go and find out what's happening, I think, basically. And then we also follow a young girl who has a god problem. She has a god of a god of white lies, who is like he manifests as like a little creature, a little animal that she has, who is basically not physically attached to her, but they can't be apart without being in a lot of pain. And he doesn't have there's a whole thing about how he doesn't have what's the word I want? Not an altar, but like there's nobody is kind of worshipping him specifically, but he somehow exists. So we follow it. There's a lot to do with gods and things like that, and then these lot come together, and I don't really know what happens. But what I struggled with keeping track of who all the characters were. There were a lot of side characters that weren't necessarily, they were kind of added in, and there were all these names that you felt like you needed to know, but they didn't really seem to go anywhere. So I really struggled with keeping track of all the characters in that respect. I also just didn't really know what was going on, and I think I listened to a good 30% of the audiobook, and I just got to a point and I was just like, do you know what? I don't know what's going on. I'm not following this, and I need to stop. And that was just kind of where I got to with it. But as I said, I'm not sure if it was because I was listening to it as an audiobook. Sometimes that is a possibility with me, because I do sometimes struggle with audiobooks. I find I'm much better off listening to audiobooks that are like historical fiction works for me in audiobooks. I listen to The Diamond Eye, I listen to The Briar Club, and that kind of thing. Absolutely no problem as an audiobook. Thrillers work really well for me as audiobooks. Horrors can often work well for me as audiobooks. And I found the Marie Brennan History of Dragons, so although that's fantasy, it's not fantasy in the way that we have this massive world building with lots of characters. It was very much following one character. So that worked for me fine. But I have tried some fantasy books before and struggled. So it could very well be that it was just that I listened to it on audiobook, and maybe I should try it again as a physical book at some point in the future. Anyway, they were my DNFs for this month. So I guess in that case, it's time to move on to what I'm thinking about reading in March. So, as has been the case last month, I am very much at the point at the moment where I am not wanting to set a very strict TBR, because I just want to pick the things that I want to read. I don't want to be restricted to a list that I decided a month ago, basically. But having said that, I went through my bookshelves, and what I've started doing is I went through my bookshelves and I pulled off kind of 5 or 6 books that just are calling to me, if that makes sense. And then I put them in a little stack on another cabinet and was like, right, that can be my kind of plans for March. But having said that, I could still reach for other things. So let's go through those. So I'm going to start with the first 2, and we're not going to do a full synopsis of this because I talked about them last time. But we have The Baby Dragon Cafe by A.T. Qureshi. Now, I have started this. You can see I'm just there. I started it on holiday, and then I got sidetracked by the appeal, and I haven't picked it up again since. So I do really want to get this one finished this month, and I am planning on picking it up. This is a romance. Although, having said that, I was under the impression that it was meant to be like a spicy kind of romance, but having talked to a couple of other people about it, apparently the romance doesn't really get going until like near the end of the book. So I think I might approach it slightly differently going back into it, because I was kind of thinking to myself, this was feeling a little bit slow. But now I realise that it might be quite good. Anyway, we follow Saphira, who has a cafe that allows baby dragons into the cafe, but they cause quite a lot of damage, and she is struggling for money because of that, because she keeps having to fix things and buying her new coffee machine, which is really expensive. But she then meets Aidan, who comes from a family of dragon riders, and he has been left this baby dragon that his brother has died and left him this baby dragon that he needs to raise, but he knows nothing about dragons. This dragon is out of control. He doesn't know what to do with it. But the dragon seems to like Saphira and seems to be calm around Saphira. And Saphira has always wanted a dragon, but she doesn't come from a dragon family, so it's not likely to happen. So when he says, oh, would you train my dragon for me and I will pay you? She says, yes, absolutely, I will do that. So yeah, that is what goes on in that. And then I assume that Saphira and Aiden get together at some point. I assume it becomes a romance. But I suspect there's lots of baby dragon stuff in between. So yeah, I am hoping to come back and finish that. I will go for that one and then I'll talk about what I'm currently reading. The other one that is still on my list is Fourth Wing. I thought I would keep this on the list. I didn't get to it last month, but I will do my best to try and get to it this month. If I don't get to it this month, I think it might go back on the shelves for some point in the future. Do I need to give you a synopsis of this one? I feel like I read the back last time, but basically, I believe this is a kind of fantasy romance with dragons. We follow Violet, who ends up becoming a dragon rider, even though she wasn't expecting to and didn't really want to. And there's enemies to lovers with dragons, kind of, I think, is the consensus of that, basically. Right, currently reading. I am currently reading The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. And I am just over halfway through at the moment. And this is so good. So we follow Mouse, who has volunteered to clear out her grandmother's house. Her grandmother has died. Her grandmother was a horrible woman. But her dad basically says, look, would you be willing to do this? It's a lot of work, but could you do it? And she says, yep, no problem. She's just had a breakup from a relationship. She could do with getting away for a little bit. So her and her dog, Bongo. Is her dog called Bongo? I feel like her dog's called Bongo. And I'm now wondering if I've got that right. Where's the dog's name? Bongo. Her dog is called Bongo. Her and her dog Bongo go to her grandmother's house. She hasn't been there since she was a child. And she gets there to discover that her grandmother was a hoarder. And there is a lot of stuff in this house and it's going to be a big mission, but it's fine. She starts sorting it out. And then she is in her step-grandfather's bedroom where she's decided to sleep, and in the drawer she finds her step-granddad's journal. And he starts in the journal to talk about strange things. He talks about some rocks and effigies and twisted ones and all of this kind of thing. And at first, she just dismisses it as the nonsense and the kind of an elderly man who is starting to struggle with dementia and all of this kind of stuff. But then she starts to see things. Things start to happen that shouldn't have been able to happen. And she starts to hear things. And yeah, it's creepy as anything. So yeah, it is, I'm really, really, really enjoying it. I quite like that this starts with her basically saying, this happened to me and I am telling you the story of what happened to me. And it gives you like almost little spoilers. So, and I have just checked that this isn't a spoiler, but what I really like is right at the beginning in the first chapter, it's very much, as I just said, it's very much her saying that this is what happened to me. You're not going to believe me, but I'm going to tell you my story. But she hints at things like the stones. She mentions the stones. And I don't know how I'm going to tell you about the stones because I wouldn't believe me. But what I loved about that is when you start to get to bits in the book where, for example, stones appear, you're like, oh, that's what she was talking about. This is something, this is a thing. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed that way that it's almost like foreshadowing. Like you've got a little bit from that first chapter of we have a little suspicion of things. And when those things start to become true in the story, you're like, oh, I've heard that. I remember this now. Like I remember her saying there was something to do with this. And it kind of ramps up that kind of expectation of something creepy being about to happen. But yeah, it's really fun. I'm really enjoying the character of Mouse. She is quite sarcastic. She's got a really great way of telling things. Like it's very much a case of if it wasn't really actually happening to me, I wouldn't believe it. So I don't know how I'm going to tell people, like, this is ridiculous, this is insane, this shouldn't be happening. But I'm very much enjoying her personality in the book as well. Anyway, I should stop telling you about it because I'm going to tell you about it when I finished. But that's one of the ones, that's what I'm currently reading at the moment and very much enjoying. Right, then I've got 4 other books which I will share quickly as potentials for this month. The first one is The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. So I am a massive fan of anything to do with, I'm a massive fan of the zombie genre. So I'm a massive fan of Walking Dead. I love The Last of Us. I've played both the games multiple times. And yeah, zombie genre, I am a massive fan. And when I said that, my friend Wynne said to me, have you read The Girl with All the Gifts? And I was like, nope. So you need to read it. So I'll just read, the blurb is very small. I will just read that out to you. Every morning, Melanie waits in her cell to be collected for class. When they come for her, Sergeant Parks keeps his gun pointed at her while 2 of his people strap her into the wheelchair. She thinks they don't like her. She jokes that she won't bite. They don't laugh. Yeah, that doesn't sound much, does it? I've read other synopsises online, but I very much think it's one of those books where you're going to kind of learn more. I can't tell you much about it other than that, and the fact that I know it fits within the zombie genre. But yeah, I am excited to kind of get to this, hopefully this month. Then I have read Rising by Pierce Brown. Now this has been on my radar for absolutely ages. I bought this specific book for Tom, my husband. I bought this for him Christmas 2023, I think, and he hasn't read it yet. And I've got to the point where I'm like, tough, I'm going to read it first because you haven't got to it yet. He is quite a slow reader. Although he is reading a lot more nowadays, he is still quite a slow reader because he tends to only read at bedtime. So he gets through like maybe a chapter a night, if that. But from what I know, we follow Darrow, and this is set in a world where there is a kind of class divide, and he is a red, which is like the miners of this world. And then one day he discovers basically, do you know what? I'm just going to read the back. We'll just read the back because I always try and give synopses of books I haven't read yet, and it's always a struggle. So we're just going to read the back and then you can see if it grabs you as much as it grabs me. So, the Earth is dying. Darrow is a red, a miner in the interior of Mars. His mission is to extract enough precious elements to one day tame the surface of the planet and allow humans to live on it. The Reds are humanity's last hope. Or so it appears, until the day Darrow discovers it's all a lie. Mars has been habitable and inhabited for generations by a class of people calling themselves the Golds. A class of people who look down at Darrow and his fellows as slave labour, to be exploited and worked to death without a second thought. Until the day Darrow, with the help of a mysterious group of rebels, disguises himself as a Gold and infiltrates their command school, intent on taking down his oppressors from the inside. But the command school is a battlefield, and Darrow isn't the only student with an agenda. So from what I've heard, this is a series of books that doesn't pull punches. You will lose characters that you love. It can be heartbreaking. It is very kind of that kind of, you know, I think maybe, I don't know, I've not read Game of Thrones, but from what I get, it's that same kind of idea that like nobody is safe, no character is safe. And it, yeah. But it is a series. I think it's set into trilogies, but I'm not 100% sure. But I have heard very, very good things about it. Everyone I know that has read it has raved about it, and I am so excited to go in. However, it is one of those series that lulls you into a false sense of security because the first book is that thick, but subsequent books are quite chunky. So that is that one. I have then got Bat Eater by Kylie Lee Baker. This is an Evernight exclusive from Alima Crate, so I have got absolutely gorgeous sprayed edges on it. It is a different cover to the original cover. It also, I've just lost the little thing in there. It also has really cool end pages. I'm going to take the cover off actually as well. Are the end pages at the back different? Yeah, really cool end pages, and then the cover inside is very pretty as well. It also has an alternate cover from the inside as well. So this is horror. So Evernight, if you've not come across Evernight before, Evernight is the kind of horror subsidiary, I guess, of Illumicrate, who do special edition subscription boxes. And the Evernight subscription is a quarterly subscription, so you get 4 books a year, basically, and they're all special editions. And this was January's book. And my goal this year is to read all of the Evernight books within the year, basically. I don't want to end up with not reading them. So we will read the synopsis of this one. Cora Zhang is a crime scene cleaner, but the bloody messes don't bother her, not when she's already witnessed the most horrific thing possible, her sister being pushed in front of a train. But the killer was never caught, and Cora is still haunted by his last words, Bat Eater. These days, nobody can reach Cora, not her aunt who wants her to prepare for the Hungry Ghost Festival, not her weird colleagues, and especially not the slack-jawed shadow lurking around her doorframe. After all, it can't be real, can it? After a series of unexplained killings in Chinatown, Cora believes that someone might be targeting East Asian women, and something might be targeting Cora herself. Soon she will learn you can't just ignore hungry ghosts. So this was billed to me by somebody recently as a political horror. So a horror based around kind of very political elements and things like that. Yeah, it just sounds really cool. I'm really interested in it and I'm hoping to get to it. Plus, this is a very, very, very pretty edition of the book. And then finally, one more, and that is A Letter to the Luminous Dead. Now, this was one of my book club picks last year and I didn't get to it, but I picked this copy up because I couldn't resist. It's just a standard hardback. I can't remember whether I picked it up in Waterstones or whether I got it from the library, whether I got it from the supermarket, to be completely honest. But it is just a standard hardback, but it is such a beautiful cover, isn't it? That is stunning. So with this, we follow... trying to remember basically. So we have 2 characters who are writing letters to each other, and then they go missing, and then years later one of the characters' sister and the siblings of the 2 characters that go missing are trying to solve the mystery of the disappearances, looking at letters and sketches and field notes and stuff that have been left behind. But it's meant to be beautiful and enchanting. I believe it's the start of a series. Yes, it's the Sunken Eye Archive. Also, who doesn't love, if my camera would focus on it. You gonna focus on it? Is it not covering my face enough? There we go. Who doesn't love a book that will put the book number of the series on the spine? So yes, now it's not going to focus back on my face because I tapped the screen. There we go, I'm back. Yeah, it's meant to be lovely. I will read the synopsis quickly because although I gave you that a little synopsis, it didn't quite give you the whole picture. My dear E, I have thought of nothing else but you and your letters over the past day or so, and I do not intend to start thinking of anything else anytime soon. A beautiful discovery outside the window of her underwater home prompts the reclusive E to begin a correspondence with renowned scholar Henry Clell. Henry Clell, yes. Names. The letters they share are filled with passion, at first for their mutual interests and then, inevitably, for each other. Together they uncover a mystery from the unknown depths, destined to transform the underwater world they both equally fear and love. But by no means coincidence, but by no mere coincidence, a seaquake destroys E's home and she and Henry vanish. A year later, E's sister Sophie and Henry's brother Virion are left to solve the mystery of their siblings' disappearances, with the letters, sketches and field notes left behind. As they uncover the wondrous love their siblings shared, Sophie and Varian learn the key to their disappearance and what it could mean for life as they know it. So yeah, that is the final one that I am thinking about getting to this month, but we will see how it goes. Yeah, I have a yarn show this month, so work will be really, really busy, and also I'll have a weekend where I'll be away and working all weekend. I've got family visiting at the end of the month. There's a lot going on this month, so whether my reading time will be impacted or not, I don't know, but we'll find out, I guess, when we go into next episode's stats. But yeah, that is all the books that I have read and all the books I am hoping to read. So as always, if you have read any of these books already and you enjoyed them or didn't enjoy them, then tell me about it in the comments. Would you recommend anything based on the books that I've enjoyed? Are there any other books that you go, oh, if you liked that, I think you'd like this too? Then let me know in the comments. We will talk books in the comments. And if you have got to the end and you don't want to leave me recommendations or chat books, then why not leave me some kind of sea creature emoji, because that seems fitting with this book. And I will see you again in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.